Welcome to Chennai International Centre's own podcast channel. Chennai International Centre is an intellectual platform for diversified discussions of public interest. With 5 years of meaningful work, curated panels, and design programs, we've had the privilege of hosting many speakers of both national and international repute. Good morning and welcome to today's podcast with our special guest, Dr. Jayaprakash Muliyil. Dr. Muliyil is a noted epidemiologist and chairman of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the National Institute of Epidemiology and former principal of Christian Medical College, Vellore. You may recall he was a special guest at our earlier discussion on COVID-19 endgame scenarios. Welcome, Dr. Muliyil. It's lovely to have you with us on our show today. From the last time you spoke to us midway through the pandemic to now, there are some remarkable developments. I'm sure our audience would love to hear from you on what we know for sure now from what we knew back then.
Since this disease called COVID-19 been visiting India, and to start with, there are a lot of fear, anxiety, and consequently stigma attached to the disease. And this leads to a situation where you tend to become fairly unjust in the way you deal with people who are suffering from the disease. And we saw examples of all these things. Fortunately, events have developed in such a way we have a better grasp of the disease. And in fact, I think it's not based on fear. It's based on sound scientific knowledge. Now we are able to face this infection. What do we know about it now? First of all, it's a disease very difficult to stop from transmitting one to another. It's our humanness to be together with one another, to talk to one another. And when you are denied that, you stop being a human society. And that is the way to stop the disease. It's almost impossible.
COVID-19 spread in India is seen declining, while there is also a new strain of the same virus that's spreading globally. Dr. Muliyil, could you help us understand the nature of this spread, especially from an Indian context?
The so-called second wave in Europe and all, it's a nomenclature which has no scientific basis. People try to suppress the transmission using the standard methods of, covering your nose and mouth, and hygiene and keeping a distance. But after some time, this is not going to hold on. We will also refer to the fact that there is a new strain of virus there and maybe everywhere, and how it will affect our future progress in India. What has happened in India is the disease transmission went as if nothing could stop it. And that was something anticipated, because for an Indian society where a large number of people live on daily wages and work-related income, it is impossible to say stay at home. So, naturally, this disease spread all over India. And repeated sero surveys done so far shown the increase of infection all over the country. But the bright part of the whole thing is the mortality rate. Now, this is where I want to say something very important. Now, you get words like case fatality rate and infection to mortality ratio, everything very confusing. But there are two things that was typical of this particular disease. One, that it hardly affected the young people in terms of mortality. Okay? Below the age of 15, the mortality is close to zero. And above that, up to 40, it's very, very minimal. This data, when it came from Europe, we did one thing here. We used that age-specific infection-related mortality to Indian population. Remember, Indian population is a younger population. And then calculated if India were exposed to the virus, what would be the number of deaths we'll have to face. But being a firm believer in herd immunity, I made allowance for that. And I said the threshold immunity of 60% or so, that means everybody doesn't have to get infected. Even then, when I applied the European rates, this happened in April, and we got a very, very large number. And I did go public about it. It's about a couple of million deaths. But what happened is it never came true. Indians have naturally a much lower mortality. And we may have to think about why it is. We need more research. But offhand, I can tell you 3 important reasons why we have got an extremely low mortality. And one probably is the fact that compared to a developed country like UK or Italy or US, our prevalence of comorbidities may be less, purely because the mortality for that events in Indian context may be higher. So they don't survive that very long. So at any given time, the proportion suffering from these comorbidities may be less. That is one. The second is we definitely don't have the kind of obesity level you see in the West. For example, US, 67% of the population is either overweight or obese. Not so in India. And obesity, as you know, is an important risk factor. The third blessing we have is we live under the sun in the tropical weather. And most Indians have very good levels of vitamin D, much higher compared to those who live in temperate climate. And vitamin D, as it turns out, has an important role in deciding case fatality rate. So we are fortunate in that way. And what about the trajectory of the epidemic? It has been steadily coming down practically everywhere in India, except for Kerala, of course. And that trajectory confirms our belief that what we expected earlier, that when once infected, people acquire good immunity. That means there is an opportunity of the threshold herd immunity to work, which will put brakes on the transmission dynamics of the virus. It is happening, and you can know that in Tamil Nadu, it's very obvious that case numbers are coming down steadily. All over India, it's coming down, and which is quite for relief to know this happening. So compared to the West, we have a much, much higher proportion already immune. Now, earlier in the game, there was a lot of talk about the immunity obtained from natural infection being transient, which has been shown to be false. There's no doubt about it. We have got robust immunity in terms of antibody production, and not only that, there is a very good T-cell based immunity which will give you long-lasting memory.
And about the vaccines, it's reached Chennai, unloaded and stored. Could you tell us about the different vaccines in the market and what's important for us to know at this point?
Now, as you all know, India also has got vaccine. Now, the simplest vaccine is a killed vaccine. Indian vaccine, one of them, produced by the Hyderabad group, is a killed vaccine. And it's similar to the Chinese vaccine, killed. Now, what you do in the vaccine development is that you do the same thing and you try to mimic the natural infection. You present the body with the antigen of the virus. Now, who does the hard work? Your body does the hard work. It looks at the antigen and produces the antibody. So the killing power still coming from the vaccine recipient's body. Now, this is the beautiful part. The evolution of our existence, our biological evolution, has created in us a fantastic immune system. It's incredibly complex. It knows how to deal with practically any organism, and it does respond very efficiently and effectively. Now, most people won't know much about immunology, but their bodies know how to immunologically react to all these dangerous antigens. And they, in fact, test out a series of antigens and produce antibodies and carefully assess. That is, each human being does it and responds appropriately so that the disease is contained and you get an immunity that lasts. So, in the case of natural infection, this is what happens. And when you present the antigen in the form of a vaccine, exactly this happens. Now, so the other vaccine that we are now, the one that you must be familiar with, which India is encouraging the production, is the Oxford vaccine. And there, just like the Russian vaccine, they use another virus as a backbone. And they clean up the virus from inside and put instead our coronavirus protein in it, structures in it, so that it can respond to the coronavirus antigens inside there. Now, it is done beautifully, it is safe, it can't transmit from one to another, cannot cause disease. We know all those things. But we have the question now is, this is a new type of vaccine, and you all must be familiar with the mRNA vaccine, where they don't even have a viral structure. They take one messenger RNA alone and then inject into you. Now remember, life is full of messenger RNAs. Okay, your whole body has huge number. Every potato, every tomato has messenger RNA. This messenger RNA is the one that codes for the spike protein. So what these scientists have done is very cleverly, they have made sure this messenger RNA, which is usually very transient, it is there for a minute and gone. They have managed to make it stay for maybe a day or two, and it produces enough of the spike protein to convince the body that there has been an invasion, and the body again has to respond. Remember, when you get a shot of vaccine, it's your body that responds. The vaccine doesn't like an antibiotic. You get an antibiotic. Antibiotic kills the organism. Not in vaccine. The hard work is done by your body. Now, basically, whenever a vaccine comes, we ask the question, is it safe? Or is it, second question is, does it really protect? Protect against what? The protection has to be against severe disease or death. And you should have a demonstration that it does cause a reduction. This is crucial. And if it doesn't, if there's no evidence, it will be actually not quite ethical to offer it as a vaccine, because vaccine has to show it can protect against severe disease or death. Now, the thing is, this brings to two important conclusions. Number one, that if you've already been confirmed, certainly infected, then you will have most probably good immunity. A small percentage may be different, but majority will have good immunity. And as a consequence, you will not develop the disease ever anymore. Disease due to COVID-19. The second thing from this is, usually when you try to create a vaccine, if the virus is an immunogenic virus, then the success of the vaccine is also granted. Okay? In some cases, there are difficulties in creating vaccine because the nature of the virus. But this particular virus has got a good immunogenic structure, and the vaccines will come in very useful. So we should be thankful that this feared disease has petered out into a mild viral infection, and that it is not a severe threat to us. And I think above all, we can stop being under any disaster management act, because disaster has passed as far as India is concerned. And I hope this Republic Day onwards, we'll be free from all fear and be able to do whatever we like. Thank you very much.
That was Dr. Jayaprakash Muliyil with us on the show, sharing all that we need to know about COVID-19 and the latest vaccine developments. Thank you for joining in this episode of Chennai International Centre's podcast. Please be sure to share this on digital media or anywhere else. This podcast can be accessed on Chennai International Centre's website, www.cic.in. Stay tuned for our next topic of discussion, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel and Twitter handle for more updates.